System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.
Inner City Left. We're very excited to be here again with Matt Sedillo alongside my partner Emoja, Lil Tanky Sumler. Today, we're going to be talking about the American oligarchy and how it basically affects the entire world. Emoja, Matt, how y'all doing today?
Oh, brother, if I was doing better, my name would be Amin.
There's that charm. There's that charm. Okay, so this I'm just going to open this up to you. We'll get into more specifics, but I did pull this up today on a site called inequality.org. Take it with a grain of salt. But I want to just read y'all a little bit of this article, and then y'all can react. Okay, total U.S. billionaire wealth up 88% over 4 years. 4 years ago, the United States entered the COVID-19 pandemic. Forbes published its 34th annual billionaire survey shortly after, with data keyed on that specific date, March 18th, 2020. And this is what they came up with. March 18th, 2020, Elon Musk was valued at $25 billion. As of March 2024, $188 billion. At that same time, Jeff Bezos went from $113 billion to $192 billion. Emoja, you may know this one. The 3 Walton members still participating in Walmart, Jim, Allison, Rob, rose from $161 billion to $229 billion. And basically the entire billionaire class is up $1.4 trillion since the pandemic began. The largest wealth transfer in human history. How do y'all react to that?
Well, before that, the largest wealth transfer in human history was in 2008 with the Wall Street bailout. So, the largest wealth transfer was in 2000. The second largest was in 2008. The next largest one was in the last, few years. So it was demarcated at 2022 or something. The fact is, I think that in a decade we'll see again the largest transfer of wealth in human history. We'll follow this in 10 years' time with some other type of fraudulent bubble. The reality is that what they call the derivatives market on Wall Street is something like 14 times the size of the gross world product. So essentially, we're living in this weird thing where capitalism really probably hit the skids probably somewhere in the mid-1980s. Capitalism is basically a relationship between a worker and an employer, and the employer is keeping the money, he's not paying the worker. When you have these tech billionaires where you have Facebook's got something like 5,000 employees, Twitter's got somewhere around the same, and these are giant corporations. That's not really old school capitalism. That's totally based on a speculative market. That's totally based on what they think things are valued at, and eventually that system's going to crash. The system it consistently crashes and has to be bailed out because it severed those relationships. So why is Elon Musk so wealthy? I know why Jeff Bezos is wealthy for the same reason that John D. Rockefeller was wealthy. He's wealthy for that basic old school exploitation. The Waltons are wealthy for that basic old school exploitation. But these tech billionaires like Zuck, like the people that own Netflix, like all these tech billionaires, that's not really old school capitalism. That's some weird marriage between Wall Street and the Silicon Valley that is just saying things are worth what they're worth, and that just being given reality. But there's a reason why. The tech bubble exploded. There's a reason why Wall Street exploded, and there's a reason why during COVID, during this COVID epidemic, this kind of world of this technocracy kind of world rose. In some ways, Elon Musk is an old school capitalist, and that he does produce Teslas and he does produce this. But in many ways, he's a creature of Wall Street. He's a creature of speculation of what things might be valued at. He's not wealthy for the same reasons that Jeff Bezos is wealthy. And Jeff Bezos is not wealthy for any good reason either. When I say he's like Rockefeller, he's very much like Rockefeller in that Jeff Bezos plotted a scheme where he would lose money for a good decade or so before he would actually make money in order to drive out the competition or just destroy the competition. Walmart has the exact same model. There's really only a couple of ways of doing these things. And the Waltons, they followed the model. and Bezos followed the model of having investment in order to lose money or not make that much money in order to destroy any competitors. And then when the time comes, raise your prices to normal market rate. And then all of a sudden but by the time you do that, the road is clear. You own everything. And so that's what Rockefeller did. And that's what Bezos has done. And that's what the Waltons did. So that's the old school way of doing things. But this other stuff is that the market's mixed with it's basically going to collapse again and again and again and again and again.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. I think about the first time as a young person I conceptualized what a billionaire was, and it was when I was watching Wall Street, the whole Gordon Gekko idea of are you liquid? And most of these guys, to Matt's point, are not liquid. You cannot go to any place in the world and extract that, right? You can, much to the point whereas like Elon Musk, right, who I would say is a bit of a hybrid billionaire. Like most of his stuff is evaluations. He was able to buy Twitter based upon his market evaluations of his represented stock position at Tesla. But some of it is, and let's be honest, fat defensive contracts that are no bid, for United States Space Force, moving things that are inconvenient for the United States Space Force to move, right? And that's real money. That's real money in the way that, Bezos has real money or the Waltons. But again, so he's a hybrid. Whereas someone like Zuckerberg, it's completely speculation. It's all based upon what the evaluation of Meta is at any given moment. So as those things fluctuate, his wealth goes up and down, and it's not real. It's all based upon these same false evaluations that really destroyed Enron. It's funny because they were prophetic in their outlook. 10 years later, and everything that happened at Enron would be totally kosher by today's standards. And that's what the 2008 bubble kind of went to. Derivatives are why, quite honestly, from a geopolitical point of view, the West is failing to defeat Russia because in terms of real production, the West doesn't produce. Their number one economic product is banking services. Money off of interest, money off of lending money off of inflation, and all of that works while the world is tied behind this dollar, Bretton Woods contract, right? But as the world continues to devalue the dollar and it loses its monopolistic kind of hold on global economy, those evaluations will continue to be adjusted. How much of that money is real? Not much of that money is real. But the power that they gain from it is absolutely real.
We hear this often, the Russian oligarchs who are so connected to Vladimir Putin's government. We mentioned it a little bit here, but how are these oligarchs, or I guess we call them here billionaires, how deeply connected are they to the United States sort of government apparatus?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of them donate to both parties. I mean, that's the real thing. I mean, the thing that becomes most obvious is when they kind of go all in on a certain set of politics. So, like the Koch brothers are like an obvious example, right? So that's just a really obvious example. They donate, hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, to the things they believe in and to think that the direction they want to see the country going. And so that's the most like obvious parallel. But like in so many ways, they're about as involved as they want to be. I mean, because they don't really have to be. I mean, the entire purpose of the U.S. government is to prop up billionaires. I mean, that's the job description for the way the United States is set up, and it's been that way since the beginning. I mean, like even in like the Federalist Papers, you have James Madison talking about there being like two. He doesn't say the word class, but he says like two like spectrum. He uses a word that's synonymous with class to describe. That there's basically two classes, and there's the rich and the poor, and then the good government ensures the leisure and the time and the ability of the rich to think clearly, to move clearly, to be able to move unfettered, and to have basically their life good, so that they can rule for the total benefit of everyone. I mean, that's what he stated he believed, and so that's just kind of the way that the U.S. government's been set up since inception. Now, the specifics of like how involved are these things? I mean, I don't know. I mean, like I think Trump really exposed a lot of it. He said, like, I know you guys are all for sale because I used to buy you. right? So I mean, like that's pretty dead on. So I mean, like I I mean, there's a whole like industrial complex to it that's really complicated about how they actually do it because America is such a hypocritical country that they can't just be outright. So there's like there's a whole like what they call it one of the streets in Washington D.C. Mochi, I'm talking about the yeah.
K
I'll,
Street,
I'll I'll turn it over to
possibly.
you. I'll turn it over to you.
Sorry, I lost y'all there for a second. Were you talking about K Street?
K Street, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
Sorry, go ahead, Emoji.
yeah,
I just
yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to chime in for my Jeopardy answer.
So what I want to ask you, Matt, is what ways does this type of wealth represent a danger, right? Not like an intellectual danger, but an actual danger to culture on Earth. Someone, for example, like a Jeff Bezos, what makes him dangerous? What makes him different from the ways that, say, like a Bill Gates is dangerous, or like a Musk, or even a Zuckerberg? Like, if you want to break into the different ways that all of those people play access to the game, right? Like, I'll give you an example. You use the Koch brothers, right? And everybody understands that the Koch brothers stood for very strict morality, very laws based, very conservative based. But one of their biggest money makers as a family was Coke Records, which brought like some of the most gangster rappers in the game, right? Which perpetuates kind of a certain bravado that then gets emulated. And these are guys
Yeah.
that are making money off of like human labor, as far as like the incarceration. That's another one of their industries. Is Koch brothers are huge investors in essentially in the prison industrial complex.
Not to mention they're a huge. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. I just wanted to throw this right in here. They are also huge donators to the Smithsonian Museum, the Natural History Museum. Interesting enough, they have a whole plaque when you walk into the Natural History Museum, like thanking one of the Koch brothers. So it's so interesting, they're the ones who are creating this, helping create these fossil fuel, environmental, degrading aspects. And here they are in the Natural History Museum with the plaque. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Matt.
Well, I mean, like, look, geez, it's a couple of different directions to go here. I mean, like, I think hypocrisy is part of the Koch family legacy. I mean, their father was actually the industrialist that kind of got the family got their wealth really started with, and he was a founder of the John Birch Society. He was one of the two founders of the John Birch Society, which was this really extremely racist kind of like more kind of like the Klan without being so rude. I mean, kind of like a less crude version of the Klan, like a gentleman's Klan. Yeah. Kind of like a gentleman's Klan, right? I mean, it wasn't like the gentleman's club, a gentleman's Klan. That's what kind of the John Birch Society was, but on paper they weren't really racist. They were anti-communist. I mean, that's what they would proclaim. But a lot of the Koch brothers' initial money was made selling to the Soviets. So I mean, that's so that's not really, Koch Industries is known for their hypocrisy. But it's very fascinating. I mean, they have got their tentacles everywhere. You bring up the Smithsonian, but over at the University of Arizona, in his later years, they highlight the school hired Noam Chomsky to come work there, and that's good. Noam Chomsky's done a lot of good things overall. I mean, there's criticisms, but overall, he's a net positive guy. It's net positive, and they paid him very well. So what happened was, Arizona's a very very right wing state, and so people complained, and so for all the money that they gave Noam Chomsky, they had to give equal funding to create a Koch Institute of Freedom, out there. So what is happening now at the University of Arizona is they are paying Noam Chomsky a lot of money, and whatever, but they're also paying even more money to have a Koch foundation there to match those funds, and all these funds are being taken out of guess who's losing a bunch of their funding? A lot of the faculty of color, a lot of the to prop up, the left-wing white guy, right-wing white people, and it's actually a lot of programs that like the Latino services that are, et cetera, the African-American student centers, all this and that, they're actually losing funding. So that's just like, this is what I'm hearing from people who work there. So it's really quite a mad thing. I mean, the way the U.S. works, but speaking, and I don't blame them Chomsky for that, but I'm saying the tentacles of the Koch brothers, how they are, they're just the go-to. Something's like, something here is too lefty, we need to bring someone in. It's always the Koch Foundation. But so that's the obvious thing. But but the reality is that there's so many other people that are so like just thoroughly thoroughly ingrained in the American system, um, I mean, just it's like talking about like, the amount of H2O in the ocean, or the amount of amount of water in the ocean. It's just like it's the system itself.
We've heard a lot of this idea of a resource curse, where you have resources, whether it be oil or rare earth minerals, maybe cobalt, something of that nature. And now the United States is very interested in your country and how those resources are going to be handled. We saw that sweet crude was found off the coast of, I think it was Guyana in Venezuela, and there was a conflict there. Elon Musk famously said in response,
We will coup whoever we want.
"Yeah, we'll coup whoever we want." In reference to someone calling him out about the resources being stolen in Bolivia. So how do billionaires sort of exacerbate sort of these resource curses for whatever reasons, and how do those affect those nations?
Well, Evo Morales was the president at the time, and Evo Morales, they were talking about the will coup whoever we want, and Evo Morales was actually, while he was leaving, while he was flying over Europe, was actually had his plane, brought to the ground, and they demanded to search his plane to see if he was transporting Edward Snowden. Yeah, and so it was he was grounded for the high crime of flying presidentially brown or something. I don't know. That was kind of over European airspace, and that's something that really happened. And of course the coup took place, and the coup leader Janet Inez, who was a very clearly brown indigenous woman as well. Bolivia is the most indigenous country in probably in the world in terms of Amerindian a nation in the world, highest population of Amerindians. But she was claiming that she was Norwegian and stuff like this. So it was really just a bizarre coup full of strange characters. But Elon Musk was in favor of the coup because he was in favor of getting the lithium from Bolivia, and basically strip mining Bolivia has been a means by which has been going on since the Europeans came to the Western Hemisphere. I mean, actually, people don't really know this, but there's a silver mine in Bolivia called Potosi, which according to Eduardo Galeano was actually the main funder of the Spanish Armada. I mean, it was actually that was a much more lucrative find than what they found in Mexico. So that silver mine there was actually one of the things that really fueled initial Spanish imperialism. I mean, in addition to a lot of other things, but it was kind of like the number one moneymaker. And so if you look at the what happened with Spanish imperialism, the Dutch began to finance it, the English began to finance it as well, and basically the English and Dutch were able to take over from the Spaniards, and really kind of turn it into the kind of the world that we're more familiar with, because Spanish had kind of hybrid feudalistic type system. These were the first capitalists, the Dutch and the English, and so but they got in through financing the conquest and the plot and the plunder of the Spaniards. So in many ways, stealing from Bolivia is one of the catalysts to the world economy as we understand it. That said, I mean, Elon Musk it's wild in the hypocrisy. I mean, some people think like, oh well, Elon Musk, yeah, he's a bad guy, but maybe his heart is good. I mean, I was talking to someone recently, like, yeah, he does bad things, he's crazy, but he's got intentions that he really does want to make the world a better place. But and the evidence that he wants to make the world a better place is that he wants to terraform Mars to go live there. So I don't really think that's evidence that you want to make the Earth good, that you were trying to find a way to live on Mars. But that's kind of the idea, that this guy's a visionary, wants to live on Mars. But somehow he's creating electric cars, so he's moving away from fossil fuels. So he's trying to save the environment, and yet he's strip mining a place for lithium, and that's creating huge environmental destruction, not just for the people of Bolivia, but for the entire world, right? We have one world with one sky, and so you punch holes in that sky, it's just problems. So he's actually creating incredible environmental destruction, not just in Bolivia but all over the world. Strip mining for lithium, from coltan for this, in the Congo, and all kinds of places that are required to make his machines work. That in many ways, yes, you're getting rid of fossil fuel, but you're still involved in mining, you're still involved in extraction. So it's completely hypocritical and ridiculous as far as its effect on Bolivia. Bolivia is one of the minerally richest places in the world, and yet it is the poorest country. It is, along with Haiti, is the poorest country. I forget which one where per capita. They go back and forth. It's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. So it's a terrible thing. It's terrible. It's horrible.
I think about the cool whoever we want often, right? As we've just now got our first woman president in Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, and that party was responsible for renationalizing petroleum in Mexico, which had become kind of a partially nationalized, partially corporate, but also nationalizing the lithium resources, right? So, like, I'm already prepared for all of the horrible things I'm going to hear about this person simply because they haven't allowed the Americans access to these markets. But my question to you would be, as we talk about someone like a Musk, someone that's a dual national billionaire, what are the particular types of intricacies they represent as far as dangers to nation states?
I mean, I think that so he's still part of like the Western imperialist push, right? Being a South African. So he's still not. It's not like Jack Ma. It's not like these Chinese billionaires or even the Russian oligarchs, as they're called, right? Who are like competitive, who represent a competitive market, or represent a market that's competing with what U.S., Europe, and this kind of like maybe Japan, kind of trilateral kind of world vision is. So he's still a part of it, but I think that what does it mean to like nation states? I mean, like, man, the when I think about nation states, like in and of themselves, especially the imperialist ones, I mean, who cares, right? But I think about but I also think about that also means the social services for the people living within them, and so this whole new Richistan, as an author coined a phrase, this new global citizenry for extreme wealth. I mean, I think that it represents a huge threat to not necessarily the nation state, but like to civic societies of every nation, right? And that's a way of framing it. This means that like some Canadian corporation can buy up this whole like river side of Italy, and then like everyone, like people that don't live there, who you cannot find, where you cannot throw a rock at their house, there's no way of protesting them, are destroying your lives. And people in, some Japanese capitalists can buy up a whole land, a whole bunch of like housing in like Los Angeles. And then all of a sudden, all these people that live in this community for, 40, 50, 60 generations are all going to be pushed out, and there's nowhere to turn. You don't know where to throw a rock. You don't know where. Some capitalist in England can buy up a whole thing, in Mali, or some capitalist in, and then beyond that, I mean, we start talking about housing. I mean, like so much of this stuff is bundled, where like you have like
the whole BlackRock.
Yeah, you have like the Bank of Japan, the Bank of Mali, the Bank of the Bank of Peru, the Bank of this, owning a house in like the middle of like the French countryside, and nobody even knows who owns your house, right? So, or who owns the loan in your house. So I mean that's become a global thing. So like it's really become this thing where people don't even know where to get mad or where to strike or wherever. There's no mansion on a hill.
It's something I'd never really thought about, right?
Yeah.
Until like the special military operation, because it's raised some very interesting geopolitical consequences. For example, a lot of the targeting and information that the Ukrainian forces are using is coming from Starlink satellites. And this allows the government all kinds of plausible deniability. We haven't used any spy satellites to help you, right? To the point whereas Russia has advanced so far in their electronic warfare, they're able to bring down swaths, right, of information from the Starlinks. In other words, they're able to blind them without even taking them out. Where you have someone like a Musk reaching back to Zelensky saying, like, look, there is a price to fix this, but it is beyond the price that you can pay. Because he now understands he has something to lose, right? Like this spy satellite that he sold to the world, this whole network of Spylink that can be utilized, right? Now he's found out the weaknesses and how nation states can disable these things. And what are the implications? Because he's not going to be able to like write a bill to, the Federation of Russia for any type of devices that are damaged, that are being utilized in the theater of war for the material support of enemies. I think this is a fascinating place that we haven't really been in history before, right? Like we've had companies like of course the East India Company, right? That's able to start wars in India, start wars in China, right? To keep their productivity up. But I don't know if we've ever been in a place where single individuals hold this kind of sway and can actually their behaviors lead directly to military consequences. Because let's be honest, Russia could have dealt with this a whole different way.
I think that's absolutely true. I think like was it Ursula Gwynn is very famous for saying that people imagine there was a time when people couldn't imagine something other than the rule of kings, and now we have capitalists, right? So we can imagine one without them. Well, I mean, I think that that's a very positive thing that she's saying, but I think that there was a world, the time before nation states, as we understand the modern nation state republic, the type that we understand with the Congress and local representation. There was a time before that. There was a time when things were different, and it can go away too, and it can go to the direct rule of this Mad Max, Emoton Joe type thing, where where billionaires just have their own citadels, and that is the nation state, and that's totally possible. There's a move in that direction. I mean, it's a move in a direction that goes beyond what we kind of understand as a government. Even a capitalist government, it's still a government that's there to regulate the transactions between capitalists and their relationship with the working class, right? So that's what a capitalist government does. It basically handles disputes between capitalists and also ensures the general safety of capitalists. But it can go beyond that, where it's just straight up there is no government. It's just capitals with the private armies, with the private whatever, and what they can accrue and how they can do it. I mean, and I think that everything in transition looks weird until it coagulates into what it is. And so I think we're in a transitionary period.
My last question to you would be, and then I'll hand you back over to Amin, is with the emergence of the BRICS economic system, what type of threat do you think that represents as a counterbalance to the hegemonic economic power of the oligarchs in the West?
Well, I think that the rise of these places that were not a part of, because whatever you want to say about, Brazil, for instance, whatever you want to say about Brazil and its actual composition of people and who is white and who isn't white and who would be white by a Brazilian standard versus an American standard, right? Because a lot of people in Brazil who are considered white would not be considered white in America. So it's very these are kind of weird things. But whatever we want to say or not say about Brazil was not part of the European conquest of the world. It was not England. It was not France. It was not the United States. Well, later, Brazil is a different history and was not part of the colonization of the world. Itself was a colony. You could say it's settler colonial. You could say a number of things with that. And those are all interesting arguments to have. But that's Brazil. Russia, similar. I mean, it's there was Russian imperialism, but it was not part of the capitalist expansion it was not part of the capitalist conquest of the world. Russia was a very bit player in all of that. There's some colonization in California, some colonization in Alaska. Most of the large Russian landmass, which you could argue itself is like an imperialist holding from a feudal time, still not part of the capitalist. What we're talking about, not part of post-industrial revolution.
Yeah, Europe will never forgive Russia for making colonies of Europeans.
No, they won't. And so that's not the same thing. China, obviously, China's a completely different thing. China's got its own history. It's got its own history of hundreds of years of what they consider, humiliating defeat. But before that, thousands of years of dominance, right? So they got their own thing. India, similar kind of situation. So these are, all countries independent and different from one another. But none of them were part of the past 500 years of global domination of the capitalist system. They did not have a role in that. In fact, in many ways, they were all victims of it. And so they are represented. What they represent is people grabbing hold of the tools and the mechanisms that the colonizers themselves had. It's basically people. The rabbit got the gun, right? So that's what it is now. And so I think that the rise of those things is a huge threat to Western imperialism, to Western European imperialism, or to a trilateral kind of vision of the world. It's a huge threat to it, and it's not something that's going to happen. It's something that's been happening. I mean, things are a process. I mean, all this stuff I talked about automation earlier. It's not like automation's going to happen. Automation is happening. It's been happening. It's been happening my whole life. I mean, automation, as we understand it, to the replacement of workers, that began in the late 70s. It happened a few years before I was born. And my entire life has been the fact that the industrial economy is disappearing. So when I was a kid, that was told, like, well, when you grow up, there's not going to be factory jobs. And then, like, by the time time for me to get a job, the idea of a factory job was like, that's old. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this is service economy. Da, da, da. So similarly, this idea that, like, one day, China's going to rise. I mean, that's been happening. I mean, that's you can look at from mid 90s to when it was like maybe the world's 12th largest economy to today, where it's like, yeah, it's number 2 and it's going to be number 1 in the not too distant future. And so that's just China. And, you pair it with Brazil, Russia, India. Then we're looking at something else. And then after that, perhaps the inclusion of Mexico, perhaps the inclusion of South Africa and a few other countries. Now you're looking at some really major world economies. I don't know about South Africa is even more complicated because, they've totally been aligned with Europe and America. So I really don't know what their role will be. But but it would be dishonest if not to say that they're often included in those talks as well. So these are all very large economies, and I don't know. But even the EU itself was designed as a counter hegemonic thing to the U.S. to U.S. hegemony, because people are just fucking sick of the U.S. People just it's what it is.
Yeah, it's interesting. Garland Nixon, he talked about the United States sort of ready to collapse Europe because they, like you said, Matt, they're a rival. You also mentioned some great things from both of y'all. I wanted to ask y'all both about this. Last week, we saw President Joe Biden announce a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs. Some of them have been reported as low as 2,200 US American dollars. Do we see things like this? And what is your response to Joe Biden raising these tariffs on EVs after he's sort of talked about being an environmental president? We've already talked about Elon Musk and sort of his connection through Starlink or the rocket company that he has. The rockets blow up and everyone applauds for some reason. I don't know what that is. But those tariffs are up right now. And what does that mean?
So one thing I would say real quick is who you're referencing is BYD, who has become the largest EV producer in the world by quite a lot. And the thing is, there's a 100%. So what it proves to there's a 100% tariff on anything BYD that comes to the United States markets. So what that says to me is, it's so funny because the Americans used to be anti-protectionism, right? Free trade. That was the whole thing back when they had the economic leverage, and now they don't. So instead of free trade, we're getting conversations about overcapacity and overproduction, which really means the United States has lost the advantage as far as production, right? The fact that Americans could get a car for $2,000, something that the average worker could probably work out anywhere between a week and a month of their savings, right? Without financing, which again, you have to remember is the number one product of the United States of America. They don't want to sell cars. They want to sell financing on cars. They don't want to sell you a $30,000 car. They want to sell you a car that by the time you're done, you've paid $45,000 to buy. And just about the time that you get it paid off, it's time to buy another one. Whereas with a $2,000 car, by the time it's ready to, it dies, it's really not that big of a deal. You've had time to prepare yourself, but you can do other things with your income. Essentially, it increases your standard of living. And this is the problem, right? When you talk about a 100% tariff on that, who does that hurt? That hurts the working person. But more than just the working person, it hurts American corporations. Because if we're talking about EV trucks, right? You're talking about low emissions and you're trying to meet these standards like, for example, that California has, right? Companies now have to pay twice as much as what they would normally have to pay to get one of those EV trucks, which again hurts everyone. It hurts the employee. It hurts the common person, but it also hurts and this is what's amazing, American stockholders, right? Simply to protect the American oligarch class. It's not really about the American stockholder because most Americans don't own enough stock to really change one thing or another, even with these wildly inflated evaluations for these American corporations. No, it hurts Elon Musk. Why do we not have Huawei phones? It hurts Apple, right? Not that, oh, they're spyware, because all these phones are spyware and everyone knows it. It's not about that. It's the fact that this money is not ending up in an American oligarch's hands somewhere.
Absolutely, and people need to understand that the war against Iraq was not a war to stick a straw in the ground and suck all the oil out and just get every little last drop of oil out of Iraq. It was actually to prevent Iraqi oil from hitting the market. It was to control the amount of Iraqi oil that would hit the market. This idea, the ideas with oil wars are not necessarily wars to get every last drop out. They're actually wars to protect the oil market, to prevent too much oil, or too little oil, or too whatever oil from going on the market at any given time. De Beers spent decades convincing people that there was that diamonds were actually far rarer than they actually are. They did all kind of monopolistic practices to prevent a certain amount of diamonds from hitting the market. A lot.
Thank you. Hold on.
I was mute the whole time.
Not the whole time, just a brief moment.
Oh, okay. So De Beers. Did you get the virus of Iraqi oil?
Yeah,
okay.
De Beers.
So De Beers created a whole thing where they were, where they marketed a scarcity of diamonds. I'm not saying diamonds are everywhere, but they're not as rare as they would have us believe. To create this idea of scarcity, rare. And so similarly, the concept of electric cars being very difficult, very expensive, very cutting edge, very blah, 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 that idea has to be protected. So that Elon Musk can have a corner of the market. So similarly, the oil companies have to have a market control of the oil market. So similarly, De Beers has to have control of the diamond markets. Musk must have control of the electric vehicle market. And what deals he has worked out that's preventing these other mega corporations like Toyota. I mean, if they can make a Prius, they can make whatever the hell Tesla's doing. I'm sure of it. But and if these Chinese manufacturers can make something as cheaply for like a couple $1,000s, then I'm sure that Toyota, the massive giant corporation that's been in business for forever, which was known for in a country that's known for it's being very technologically advanced, could also do these things. So whatever Musk has that has decided within the realm of his world to give him that little corner of the market, it has to be protected. It has to be protected at all costs. It's I mean, it's not just him though. It's not just Tesla, the company, and protecting his wealth. I mean, look at how high he's evaluated. There's so many positions in the stock market. There's other people's billions that are dependent upon Elon Musk being worth 150 billion, 170 billion, 100, 200. I mean, look. He went from 25 to 175, right? See, you look at like Bezos. Bezos went from 190 to 240 or something like this, right? Whatever those numbers were. Those numbers make sense. People are at home and they're buying stuff from Amazon. It's not to champion him. I mean, if you ask me who's the most dangerous capitalist of them all, it's probably Jeff Bezos, because he's looking to capitalize the entire world. I mean, you had the director of Roadhouse complaining that like he wanted a theatrical release because he's like, this is a big movie. This is going to be a big blockbuster movie, and it's not a good movie, but it's a blockbuster movie, right? Potentially. You don't understand. It's because the blockbuster movie that Bezos wants it only on Amazon. This is his first salvo into like destroying movie theaters, and only you don't go to movie theaters. You watch Amazon Prime, and that's it. The Bezos intends to own the world, right? That's it. So I would say he's actually the most dangerous capitalist. But I'm saying, but he is a real capitalist, as opposed to Musk, which is just I mean, like Mojo says, it's a hybrid, but a lot of it is it's based on valuation. So since his fortune is so leveraged, there are other people's fortunes who are based on his fortune being what it falsely is promoted to be. So, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, the entire government is going to move to keep Musk where he's at.
You mentioned Jeff Bezos, and I want to talk a little bit more about him and Amazon as well. We have an Amazon a warehouse not too far from here. I think it's Crystal City in Northern Virginia. It was put together by the DC mayor, Muriel Bowser, with incredible tax cuts to bring them here. And we see sort of the same thing with, I think we're all based in the United States, but I'm not. We have a very a global audience. Can y'all speak to a little bit like about the conditions of workers at these Amazon facilities and sort of the struggle to create unions in these places?
Come on, man. I mean, we had tornadoes a couple of years ago and people died because they couldn't get clearance to leave their Amazon jobs. I mean that in and of itself should have led to dire and critical criminal prosecution. You're gonna force me not to leave my job, but at the same time, you're not gonna put me in an environment that's capable of surviving the conditions of a known storm that is killing people and people died. Right? I think that you don't have to look much further past working conditions at Amazon. I mean, the people are wearing diapers on the floor because you don't have enough time to make it to the bathroom and make it back in your break time, and you'll be docked, and it accounts against your performance reviews. Like Amazon working conditions are some of the most horrendous that I can imagine.
I just repeat. I mean, people are working in diapers. I mean, like, what else I can say? I mean, like, like we have another one. We have one out here in San Bernardino. I'm not sure. I mean, I know about the one in Virginia. So the one in San Bernardino. Between the two of them, they're giant. They're giant corporations. They're hiring all these people up. I know that Amazon tried to get something out basically closer to LA, and that didn't work out for them. And but I think in my opinion, a lot of why it didn't work out was because of the resistance gentrification that was going on in Boyle Heights, where they were like Boyle Heights, for those who might know, is kind of one of the nation's leaders in resisting gentrification, and the reason why they're one of the leaders is because they would throw paint on people, they would like throw bricks through windows and stuff like that. So I mean, these things, but it's one of these counterfactuals, and people, a lot of people got mad at them for that, and they were like, oh my god, but it's a counterfactual. Well, maybe that's why it didn't happen. Maybe I don't know, but who knows why? Maybe San Bernardino was like more, they offered more attractive, whatever. But had that happened, it would have wiped out all these sides, all that, it would, anyways. But Amazon is yeah. I mean, they got these giant factories and they got people in diapers and stuff. So it's just horrible.
Yeah. I also wanted to mention too, I mean, this week ago, I have a lot of questions that we could go on for a long time. I'm so thankful to have both of y'all here. Me and Tanky are always talking sort of about Monsanto and, big agriculture. I've seen now, Bill Gates has, I don't have the number, but it's like tens of thousands of acres of farmland. And we sort of see
the single largest landowner in the world.
Yeah. And he's kind of got his hands in everything. We always hear sort of the conservatives always talk about sort of his connection to the medical field, which obviously he has a huge connection to the medical field. What's Bill Gates? What is he up to? And sort of what is your thoughts on him now? Is he sort of gone from, the Microsoft guy to now the land and medical and et cetera, et cetera?
Well, Microsoft just beat Amazon and a few others for a giant military thing. So he's very much still the Microsoft man. That's still in his wheelhouse. And that's worth billions, if not trillions of dollars. This deal they just worked out. But he's also he's always been interested in these other questions of population control. I mean, this has always been kind of a passion of his. He's a very, very dangerous guy. I mean, and he's been a dangerous guy. Just because conservatives say things, doesn't mean, let's take the Rothschild family or George Soros. These are usually anti-Semitic dog whistles for something, when used by the right. But the reality is George Soros is a very, very active capitalist in world affairs. That's a fact. I mean, that is a fact. He was very instrumental in the destruction of a lot of the economies of the Eastern Bloc after the Soviet Union fell. I mean, he was, he reaped billions off of basically, the privatization of all these social services. That's a fact. The Rothschild family controlled banking across, many, they funded wars. That's a fact. Those are facts. And the fact that Bill Gates is, the fact that Bill Gates is essentially a eugenicist is a fact. I mean, this guy's constantly, and when he talks to the World Economic Forum, he's always talking about population control. He's always talking about reducing populations in places like Africa, India, places over there, right?
High birth rates, unlike
high birth rates,
the West. Yeah.
Right.
But, they never talk about that in the West because the West has negative birth rates, right? No one ever thinks about putting those things together. The thing that's fascinating to me about a Bill Gates, like not understanding, right? When we talk about a person that goes beyond nation states, Bill Gates is probably one of 5 men on earth that can call Xi Jinping and get a meeting. Xi Jinping sees him as, has referred to him as a personal friend. Like these things, like, blow my mind. Like, you don't think about American billionaires having relationships with non-Western leaders, right? And wherever that came from. I mean, keep it with a grain of salt. I mean, there's a person that also had a relationship with Henry Kissinger, right? Xi is a complicated man. He hugs Putin. Apparently he's an emotional leader, and we're not used to seeing those kind of things. But the fact that Bill Gates goes to visit Xi Jinping on a birthday, like that's mind blowing.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. The only the last thing I'll say though is if you look at the talking points of him, he does talk about like, Africa industrializing and this being an issue. That the fact that there's going to be the African population, there's almost 1 billion people live in Africa, and if they raise their standard of living the way that other people have raised their standard of living, that's going to cause all this environmental destruction. But if you look at like a lot of these environmental things that they chart out, if you look at the population density of Europe, it's far higher than the population density of Africa. And if you look at the average carbon footprint, as they say, of a European, it is roughly 10 times the size of the average African. And nobody talks about population control in Europe. Nobody talks about, the fact that, maybe we need to decrease the amount of Europeans. Because if you look at that, it's actually pretty densely populated part of the world with a very high carbon footprint.
I mean, it's low hanging fruit, right? But I mean, when you're talking about the carbon footprint of a human being, when you have someone like a Taylor Swift that literally goes from Boston to New York in a jet plane, and then goes from Boston to Philly in a jet plane. Whereas, in a place like China, there's not even the need for that because there's high speed rail, right? But again, no one ever talks about the total economic weight of billionaires and what their carbon footprint looks like. So, like, again, how many lives is Bill Gates' carbon footprint worth, right? 1 million people in Africa, 10 million people in Africa. So those comments are always, like you said, I mean, it's not even a dog whistle. It's straight up a eugenics argument, which is always a fascistic argument because it predisposes one to assume you have the right to determine who should be having babies and who should not, which becomes in proxy which culture should continue and which culture should.
Exactly. I mean, that was really my point. This is not really to speak against, the standard of living of Europeans or to say that they should be suffering or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, you're saying this about Africa, and you never put that exact same lens or standard to Europe, which is far, far more densely populated. If you just look at the landmass of what is Europe, look at the population, which is something like 700 million, something like this, versus Africa, which is about just under 1 billion, but like huge. Europe is much more densely populated. It's much more crowded, and yet nobody talks about it in terms of oh my God, they're living on top of each other and they're throwing trash all over the place. So like it's just, but that is, if the same standard were applied to them that is applied to other people who are supposedly living in squalor or something like this, that would be the conclusion you walk away with.
Yeah, it always seems that the countries that have more white people are the ones that, are doing fine, and we just need to be more environmentally friendly. And when you talk about the global majority, you hear, well, it's the population is just out of control. And, like you said, it's usually some sort of racist or fascist dog whistle. I just want to thank you so much, Matt, for being on the show. We are going to put all of your book information, all your information on there. I know you just Google yourself. I did find your book on Barnes and Noble, so I'll have that link up. I did want to ask you before we go about the wall you have back there. You have a lot of frames up there. What's going on back there?
Those are my awards. So I have some from Mexico. I have one from the city of San Francisco. I got one from the Harvard Alumni Latino Association. I got whatever. There are about 16 total on that wall, and I got 2 more coming. One from Hungary, and one from I don't remember.
You can't keep track. No, I get it. I
can't keep track, but I can keep them framed. But so it just reminds me of like what I've done, and so it helps me keep going when I'm wondering like what am I doing. But before we go though, there's one thing I wanted to say is that like people think that Warren Buffett's a good guy. He is not. He's made his money on insider trading and on price gouging, just like every other Wall Street guy. And some of that's coming out. You can look it up. I forget who. I think it's Capital Maine or somebody covered it. But like basically, essentially, he's made the money the same way but he's been invested in his image as a homespun, good old, grandpa type figure. And because he's done that, a lot of you want to believe that. A lot of people want to think that like somebody in charge is actually a good and decent guy. But he's pulled the same sham on you that Ronald Reagan did. It is the exact same playbook. It is the exact same. I'm approachable. I'm trustworthy. You get like I'm basically a mall Santa Claus. Put your grandkid on my knee. That is what Warren Buffett has been selling you, but he is no different than Martin Shkreli. He is no different than the Wolf of Wall Street. He is no different than any of these people, except that he's 10 times more successful.
And we see this happen with U.S. Congress people all the time. Nancy Pelosi's just made a tremendous amount of money off NVIDIA, I think the chip company. So we see this
out in Taiwan. Surely there's no reason to have stock instability. As far as that goes, I mean, why would we do that?
And maybe insider trading is an entire broadcast in of itself, entire podcast in of itself. Again, thank you, Matt, for all the work that you do, and thank you so much for being here. You can find us on innercityleft.com or on Instagram at innercityleft. Our work can be seen on YouTube, and you can hear us wherever you find podcasts. I said iTunes the other day. I don't think iTunes is still a thing, but Apple Music, you can find us, or Apple Podcasts, I should say. See, I'm still messing up. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all that good stuff. Subscribe, like, comment on what you heard, and give us some topics down there. Any final words from Tanky and then Matt? No final words. Okay, great.
Fight the power.
Fight the power. That's a fact.
Beat the rich. Fuck the police.
Yes. Anything for any cool stuff? You got to throw something now, Tanky. You got to throw something. And you're muted. You got to give us a one-liner.
The greatest year in history, 1312. And we out.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' in the city left.